Well, now, as the Conservatives descend into almost civil war and the Labour leader facing criticism for not sharing a platform with the Prime Minister, you'd forgive David Cameron for perhaps wanting his old coalition colleagues to be back making the case to remain in the European Union. Of course, they still are. The Lib Dem numbers, though, are thin on the ground after their devastating general election result last year. Well, their former business secretary, Sir Vince Cable, joins me now from Twickenham. A very good morning to you, Sir Vince. And as you survey from outside government all this Conservative infighting, what's your take on that and its impact on the referendum campaign?
Well, during the general election, you remember we had this slogan, it's Cameron or chaos, and it looks as if we're getting Cameron and chaos. But anyway, that's sort of grief from last year. I'm trying to focus on the referendum campaign. I think what was said this morning about the immigration target was actually quite interesting. Mr. Gove and Boris Johnson. I mean, I and the Liberal Democrats argued throughout the coalition that it was not sensible to have a rigid immigration target that couldn't be met. I mean, it isn't just because of migration from the European Union. You can't control emigration from Britain. I mean, we're not East Germany or North Korea. And of course, if you manage to reduce British emigration, if Britain's people stay at home and work at home, of course, you then make the net immigration position worse. So it was a foolish target to have met. And you've got different groups of people. You've got asylum seekers, workers, families, overseas students who are not actually immigrants at all in the same number. And we urged them to drop this target because it wasn't achievable, but then they repeated it again in 2015. So I think the basic point that Mr. Gove is making is actually valid in its own terms, that they shouldn't have had this. But I don't remember him speaking up at the time about it.
Yeah, but what you're also saying by implication, not even by implication, what you said to him, presumably to his face when you were in government, is relax about it. It's due to economic growth in the main that so many members of the European Union want to come to the UK to work. And if the economy should turn down a bit, they'll go away again. And it's OK then for UK citizens to go and work in other EU countries.
Yeah, that's exactly right, and then that is the case we would make. That immigration is very much driven by the economy. Britain is currently going through a phase of growth, and we all hope it will be sustained. We've got very low unemployment at the moment. Again, we hope it will be sustained. It may not be, but as long as it is, you're going to get people coming to the UK looking for work and filling vacancies. And I think the key development this morning is the big story of large numbers of people who do economics. My field in business, Royal Economic Society, economists are often accused of having two different views on everything, but actually on this issue are virtually unanimous that the economic case for staying in, for Remain, has largely been won. The economic evidence is pretty overwhelming. Business is arguing this case, again, overwhelmingly. Most independent assessments of the likely consequences are all pointing in the same direction.
What's your view on this suggestion from one of the backbenchers within the Conservative Party that Mr. Cameron is causing so many problems within his party, annoying so many members of the party that they may well come for him after the referendum, even if he's won it, and remove him, and suggestions there could be another general election this year?
That's their private grief. I don't want to get involved in who should be leading the Tory party. It would actually be very difficult to hold a general election this year because we now have fixed-term parliaments, and Mr. Cameron got elected and his party won in seats like mine in Twickenham on the basis that we're going to provide us with 5 years of stable government and not run to the country again in chaotic conditions. I mean, he's won the election, he's got his mandate, he should get on and run the country, and I hope his party show a bit more of a sense of responsibility than they're currently showing.
Well, do you feel any sympathy for him, having seen it up close and personal?
Yes, I do have some sympathy with him, yeah. I didn't agree with him on everything, but I do have some sympathy with him. He had to come to a decision on British membership. He came to a decision. He's followed through on it. He's tried to renegotiate our conditions. I think actually delivered some reasonably sensible outcomes, and he's now trying to lead this campaign, which I'm part of. And yeah, I do have some sympathy with him, and people who were perfectly happy to go along with him in the last Parliament are now turning on him, and it doesn't reflect very well on them, I don't think.
And do you think, in terms of the tone of the Remain campaign, I mean, you've heard the accusations of Project Fear and over-egging things and flying kites that are never going to happen? Or do you think he's just making, and obviously you and others are just making some perfectly reasonable points?
Well, there are extremes on both sides of the argument, of course, but I think that we are trying to make a dispassionate case. I mean, the most extreme and discredited comments, I mean, this analogies with Hitler and Napoleon and this 350 million a day, which have been denounced by the Independent Statistical Authority. I mean, they're coming from the other side. I'm sure there are people on our side who occasionally exaggerate. But I think on balance, we are trying to make a reasoned case and, wherever possible, making use of people who are politically independent, who have no axe to grind. I mean, the key intervention last week was the Institute of Fiscal Studies, a highly respected body that attacks all governments for their fiscal performance, and nobody can question their integrity. They came out very clearly in terms of the cost of the budget of leaving the European Union. Bodies like the IMF, I mean, they're no axe to grind whatever in this, and taking a very strong and clear view. The World Trade Organization, which is presides over world trade, and people like Boris Johnson say we should rely on the World Trade Organization, saying it's all very difficult if we leave. And those are the key people that we should be listening to.
But I mean, it must be said, not everyone within the Remain side is perhaps so thoughtful as you when they get information like that. There's a bit of spin added to it, and we end up with third world wars and never-ending recessions. Do you think they are overdoing it a bit on the Remain side?
Well, there is exaggeration. I conceded that point a few moments ago. I don't expect that we're going to get Armageddon either way. But I think the balance of evidence is very clearly that it is in Britain's interest, and particularly on the economic side in terms of living standards and jobs, if we stay in. And I think if the argument's couched at that level and not in terms of some vast explosion that would happen if we leave, I think people will get that, and they already have. I think the economic argument's been largely won.
Great talking to us ever so, Vince. Thank you very much indeed. Sir Vince Cable there.